Um, and I'm just going to ask you some pretty general questions. So, who are you and where are you coming from?
Okay. My name is Tom Baeker. I am the president of our umbrella company is Ambrabev, Ambrabev, but we are now doing business as Blue Rook Cain Spirits. We're located in central Kentucky, which makes us somewhat iconoclastic in that Kentucky is bourbon country, and we have absolutely no bourbon, or for that matter, whiskey to offer. We offer products which are quite unique to this area, as well as to the rest of the country, I would say. So that's, in a nutshell, who I am and where I'm coming from.
So, why Keshasa?
Okay. There is a story there. Cachaça, as you may know, is a distillate from alembic distillation of fermented sugarcane nectar. So, and by virtue of international trade laws, Cachaça can now only be made in Brazil, just as bourbon, to be called bourbon, can only be made in the US. The real question then is, why did somebody from Kentucky end up becoming so enchanted with Keshasa in the first place and Cain Spirits on another? So very briefly, the story began about 8 or 9 years ago. My daughter, while in college, spent large swaths of time in Brazil volunteering to teach English and music to children in the favelas or slum-like areas in a particular city in northern Brazil, Salvador. She went back there several times, fell in love with Brazil, became completely fluent in Portuguese, and as fate would have it, fell in love. So she and her partner, Eduardo, were married. The wedding was in Brazil. So our family went down to Brazil from Kentucky, and that was our first introduction to Brazil. Well, to make, again, a long story short, we fell in love with the area. We fell in love with Brazil. It's a very unique sort of social milieu, different from the US. Everyone is friendly and upbeat and celebratory, and that fit perfectly with the wedding. But more specifically, we became really intrigued by Cachaça and the cocktail that was typically made with it, called the Caipirinha. It's a very simple cocktail to make, but it was everywhere. I mean, everywhere you turned, not just in city centers, but in more rural areas, in the most remote bodegas. Everybody had and was drinking some sort of concoction made with Cachaça, most usually the Caipirinha. It was just a delicious, refreshing, and wonderful drink. And in fact, even Cachaça straight became really appealing to us. So we returned to the US, told ourselves, let's make ourselves some Caipirinhas. It was very difficult to locate. First of all, locate in any package store where the hell Cachaça was located. We typically would find 1 or 2 bottles in the rum section. But it was very hard to locate, and we thought to ourselves, this is something that we should bring to the U.S. in a more robust way. I was just approaching retirement as a physician at that time, and after some discussion with my son, we decided to begin a company to import Cachaça. That was our primary thrust. We made a second visit in that case to Brazil and looked at probably 24 distilleries specific to the manufacturing of Cachaça. We fell in love finally with a distillery just north of the city of Rio in a town called Novo Fri Bordeaux. The distillery is called Fazenda Soledada. And it's a beautiful place located in a nature preserve with crystal clear running water and run by a true master distiller who was in fact at one time recently the head of the Brazilian Cachaça Association. We became great partners with him, and we have been importing his Cachaça products ever since. While we were down there, however, we also became intrigued by the production of sugarcane neutral spirit, which has the obvious correlate up here of grain alcohol or grain neutral spirit.
It's a fuel alcohol as well, right?
It is indeed. Although they are separate entities, I mean, when you import it, it has to be specified as beverage alcohol. But we decided that there was something we could do with that as well. So we imported Brazilian Cachaça and Brazilian sugarcane neutral spirit. And I can go into that in more detail if you'd like. But we got started with that by blending, proofing, hand labeling, and bottling our Cachaça product. And we also blended and downproofed the sugarcane neutral spirit, and after filtration, hand bottling, and hand labeling, it became our Brazilian sugarcane vodka. We became fairly successful enough so that all of that, which was outsourced, we decided to bring inside with the construction of a facility, and we are now in that facility, but we made room in the facility for a distillation room and the setup of our own alembic still. And that was the satisfaction of a long-held dream to be able to make gin. So after long experimentation and trial and error with multiple different botanical recipes, we now make a third category of spirits, namely a gin, which is made by the redistillation of sugarcane neutral spirit with strictly vapor infusion of our botanicals, with a tip of the hat to Brazilian culture by including in the botanicals acai and guarana, which are two berry-like fruits indigenous to Brazil. And we love it. We've had a great response to it. But that's how we got into Cachaça and sugarcane spirits.
How have you, that's fascinating, by the way. How would you characterize the difference between GNS that starts with corn, which is predominantly how it happens, right?
Right, exactly.
And sugarcane spirit, that's using sugarcane spirit as a base.
Yeah. Yeah, you're hitting a critical question, and one which we take very seriously. There is a difference in the production of sugarcane neutral spirit and the production of corn or grain neutral spirit. The specific difference, the biggest difference, is that when you take corn or any other grain, it is the substrate from which you want to extract ethanol. In order to do that, you have to ferment it. In order to ferment it, it has to be taken to a point where there are simple sugars, sucrose, fructose, glucose. Those are not readily available from corn. In fact, you have to cook the corn and make a mash. And the first step is just clearing out the starch granules to finally release the starch. And then through continued cooking, the starch itself has to be broken down into small sugar molecules. Only then can you then go to the production of ethanol in your mash by fermenting with yeast. And then it goes through the distillation process. With the production of sugarcane neutral spirit, one entire step is skipped because the sugarcane, which becomes ethanol, is first simply pushed through a press to squeeze out the sugarcane nectar. That nectar is comprised of about 85% simple sugars, glucose, sucrose, fructose. It goes directly to the fermentation tank. There is no mash production. So we're skipping that entire process. And then after fermentation, it goes into the alembic still, distilled to a proof of perhaps 100, 110, and then diluted down to the acceptable range for the drinkable cachaça. That difference is responsible, in my view, for two important points. One is that by avoiding the cooking process, you're avoiding the release of whatever cooking is going to do, not just with the release of simple sugars, but the cooking of the other fibrous elements of the corn, which is undoubtedly adding some congeners to your eventual mash, which then can potentially get over all the way to your end distillate, even if it's highly rectified. That won't happen with Cain, because all you're doing is fermenting what comes directly out of the sugarcane itself. That implies, and in our opinion is definitely the case, a much purer 96% ethanol neutral spirit. And I would offer that truly expert testers, if they're testing sugarcane versus corn versus wheat versus, say, grapes or potatoes, they're going to be able to identify where each of those came from in terms of the origins of the neutral spirit. But there's one more.
Even at high proof.
Well, of course, in order to taste it, you're going to have to get it down to something that is palatable, literally. So, but if you dilute it to say 100 proof and then taste, this is just straight neutral spirit, essentially vodka. You will be able to, a truly expert taster with a super taster, say, is going to be able to tell nuanced differences by virtue of where the alcohol came from originally. But there's a second point, and I don't want to burden you too much with these details, but the second point is that we're skipping a whole process, and that process involves heat and cooking, and there is a tremendous amount of energy consumed in that process. The second part of this second point is that cane itself, in comparison to corn, requires much less acreage for the production of the same amount of ethanol. In fact, it's about 25 or 30% of the amount of acreage that's required. It's an agricultural land-saving process to go for cane. And then with the energy production issue, literally going from seed or cane roots to the final distillate, and you look at all of the processes that are involved in BTU consumption. The BTU consumption for the same amount of ethanol for cane is about 20 to 25% of the energy production of the energy usage that's required for grain ethanol production. So it has a significant ecological implication for cane, as well as the fact that, in my humble opinion, it produces a much clearer adverse congener-free distillate. That's why we've been so intrigued by it. And so there you have it. That's a long discussion, but it's important to understand, in my opinion.
I think the people that are going to see this that it's going to resonate with them. I had never thought about it in terms of being a 75% reduction in ground space, and that's setting aside the entire political issue of bumper crops and subsidized corn crops in the U.S.
Right.
But my next question is, as a physician, has anybody ever died of a hangover?
Well, it's not a laughing matter. There's hangovers and there's true ethanol toxicity, and there are definitely people who die of literally an excessive amount of a one-time consumption of alcohol. That
Well,
definitely does happen. If
okay,
it's the usual hangover, you feel like you're dying, and you wish you were dying sometimes. But no, I would say that alcohol from the usual use of, I'm sorry, hangover from the usual use of alcohol will not be life-threatening.
well, I mean, without commenting on it, I would be curious of your opinion on whether a cleaner, more efficient, lower uh,
Contaminant.
like a lower congener spirit, does
Yeah.
that have an impact on the impact of overconsumption? I
Yeah.
mean, you don't have to comment on this because I mean, you're
Well, it's a good question. I was actually an oncologist, and I can't tell you that potential. In fact, we are right now embarking on an experiment to look at different neutral spirits by chemical analysis to determine really what might be in there. This is at 96% ethanol, to determine what's in there besides ethanol. And it's probably water. You just can't get to past 95 or 96% under usual distillation processes. But we're looking to see if we can literally quantify the observation that I'm making here, that there may be adverse congeners in adverse flavor congeners in grain neutral spirit as opposed to cane. We'll keep you posted on that. But it's conceivable that there are, certainly when you look at what comes off of a still, from acetone to the fusel oils, those are injurious for sure. I was an oncologist. I'm not here to tell you that one, it causes more cancer than another, but it's an interesting question. And hopefully we'll have some more specific answers to that as our experiment moves forward.
Well, thank you for at least acknowledging that the question exists. My next question for you is how are you marketing Blue Rook? What's your distribution footprint? How are you getting the word out there?
Yeah. Okay. Well, we have a challenge because we're basically a startup. The fact is we've been at this for a while, but the pandemic caused a total crash of our sales. We lost our major distributor in Florida during the pandemic. It was a mess. It was exactly at that time that we introduced our gin, so we decided this is a good time to rebrand our product line. So now everything is under the Blue Rook designation or umbrella, and that's only been going on for about a year and a half. We have the additional challenge of trying to market for 3 different categories of spirit, one of which is a very niche product, the Keshasa. One is essentially a commodity vodka, and another is one which, in my view, is at the premium levels, one that it requires appeal to a very discriminating drinker in the gin. So that is a challenge, but we are working on marketing. In fact, we're in the process of developing a program where, through our focus on our own state, Kentucky, we are working on just getting the word out there, both with social media, free posting, and social media ads primarily. And we're appealing to the Kentucky connection. We are unique in Kentucky as a distiller that makes no bourbon. But Cain has an interesting history in Kentucky itself. The first settlers found that, and this is documented, that about 25% of the land was covered in cane. Now, it wasn't sugar cane, but it was cane. And several initial references to this area called it Cain-tucky. So, there's a connection there, and we're trying to take advantage of those nuances. Primarily, we're trying to, through our marketing, introduce a new spirit, Keshasa, make a claim to a unique stand in an otherwise commodity spirit with our sugarcane vodka. There are very few of those available. And making a case similarly for our gin, which is not only cane based, but is unique with the addition to our botanical recipe of those indigenous fruits from Brazil. So from the standpoint of marketing, our primary focus is Kentucky. But we already have additional distribution in Wisconsin and in Florida. We're very shortly going to be in Illinois, and we also are on LibDib, which I'm sure you've heard of. And we have not made as much use of that as we can, but that's in the process of being developed. We are listed though on LibDib.
Amazing. All right. Well, Dr. Tom Baeker, thank you so much for making the time to talk to Who's My Rep and everybody out there. So if somebody was interested in the brand, they would find you on your website, social media, and on LibDib. That's
correct. Yes. The website is bluerookdistillery.com. And
I'll be sure to put that up.
All right. Very good. Okay. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the chance to talk with you.
All right. Thank you, Tom.
All right. Take care.